So the Enterprise has a routine mission as they orbit an old dead planet, and Worf takes an away team down to investigate ruins and all this sort of thing, and then they accidentally stumbled upon an old-timey mine, and off it goes, and one of the members of the team dies as a result of the injuries. As it turns out, she's leaving behind her son. The boy's father had died previously to this some time ago, and so now he's a complete orphan. Now, overall, this is almost seemingly a quiet episode, as it's mostly dealing with, the grief and loss and all this sort of thing, and it conjures up past events, most notably with Wesley Crusher and his father, and that all comes to play in here as it stirs up the memories of all of that. But also, it's the duty of the captain to inform the next of kin that one of the officers has died, and so he has to go and face this boy. And of course, that's exactly what he did for young Wesley when his father had died. And so it's a lot of those elements of dealing with that, but it's in this, of course, fantastic science fiction environment and whatnot. So it's going to be a little more than just that. It's called The Bonding because it all comes to a head as it wraps up, where ultimately at the end, Wesley describes how he felt at the time and that he was angry at Picard initially. He says doesn't feel that way now, and ultimately Worf is the object of scorn from the boy. He keeps it to himself and all this stuff. He's very quiet, and of course obviously in a bit of shock over this, and then the weird sci-fi element is suddenly his mother appears to him seemingly alive again. Of course, immediately the rest of the crew realizes, no, that's not her. And so Worf has taken an interest in the boy, and it's this kind of thing where, of course, Wesley has a similar element. He doesn't really want to talk to the kid because he's not interested in reliving that, but, if he has to, and ultimately he does. But Worf takes particular concern here, not just because he was in charge, it was his team, and he feels guilt that he failed to do this, and he's really bothered by this was a senseless death. It was just really some stupid accident, that type of thing, and it really grinds his gears and all this sort of stuff. But at the same time, he too is an orphan, so he wants to help this kid. But of course, they're from two very different cultures, even though he was raised by humans after he lost his parents. But nevertheless, there's quite the gap there. But the strange thing that happens is, of course, this seeming ghost or what have you, but she's actually obviously an alien influence. And it turns out the planet's dead because there was this devastating war there. And it turns out there's another sentient life form there that are these energy beings, whereas the more physical beings fought their war and wiped each other out. So the remnants of the war is still around, and the away team inadvertently set off this mine and, of course, killed the boy's mother. And so now these energy beings are wanting to make up for this and are attempting to give the boy the life that he would want, with his mother. They recreate an illusion of his home and all this sort of stuff, and they almost tempt him away, but at the same time, none of it's real, and it's not, what kind of life would he have living in a dream world and all this sort of thing. So they come to terms with this, and in the end, he comes to terms with Worf, and Worf does this ceremony that's in the Klingon world called the Bonding, where basically he and the boy become members they become family. And so he takes almost guardianship of the kid here at this point. It's never followed up on. I don't recall any mention of it later, but it would be interesting. Whatever became of this kid, and is there something like he's kind of like what's the word? Not guardian, but I guess a godfather to the boy or something like that, you know. And that might have been an interesting thing for a later iteration of it. Of course, that at this point will never happen, but nevertheless, I don't think it was followed up on. But it was an interesting, sort of quiet episode, but quite compelling, and more building on the characters and whatnot. And basically, how do you deal with death? You know, even with these fantastic elements where there's an opportunity to escape all the pain of grief and whatnot, but it wasn't real. Because no matter how powerful these aliens were, if they could recreate his childhood world and all that, the truth is his parents are dead, and they're gone. And he has to face that. And with all the emotions in it, even the ones he probably realizes are wrong intellectually, but still feels them, you know, why did my mom have to die? Why couldn't Worf die? Or something, that kind of thing. And so that plays out. And it's just one of those episodes, like I said, rather quiet, rather simple, but for the mysterious element of the aliens here. But still very strong, very well done. Well, after that, the Enterprise flies into a booby trap. I know it sounds like a silly title, but it's very apt because that's exactly what happened. So once again, another almost archaeological study here in this debris field. More like an asteroid field type thing, but it's a debris field from an ancient war from long ago. Two species who wiped each other out. And it's just rather common knowledge that every now and then you stumble upon ruins or elements of those civilizations. And here they've stumbled upon a fully intact battle cruiser of the Promelians. And Picard is just, you know, tickled and excited, and they all kind of comment on, you know, because archaeology was his other secondary love to, you know, being in the Federation, being a captain and all that. And to come upon something like completely intact, you know, it's just like finding an old ancient boat from you know, antiquity and whatnot. And this is what he found in it. And so, oh man, and he can't contain himself. He wants to go see it. And so they beam over, they check it out, and of course it's, you know, the corpses of the crew are still there, and they're like, yeah, I wonder what happened, you know. And of course that's the mystery. It's always a cool setup for this sort of thing. Coming upon an old ship, exploring it, what does it mean? Of course it always leads to some trouble. And that's a cool aspect of it. It doesn't ultimately become the main concept of the show. The main concept of the show is primarily what becomes of Geordi here in his attempts to try to figure out what happened. So what happened to the ship? It got trapped. There is a booby trap that their enemies, the Menthors, had laid for them. And it's one of those things, there's these elements hidden within the debris that feeds on any power you exert to escape. And that includes, of course, the engines and the weapons. And slowly but surely, it just drains your power. And you're going to die in there, you know. You just can't get out. And so there is that. And then there's Picard and crew are trying to figure out how to get out of it. And there's even moments where they pretty much figures, oh, this is how we'll do it, and we'll blast the signals of the trap, and then fly out. And it doesn't work, and in fact, it drains more of their power, and it gets to the frustration of Picard. Damn you! You know, like that. And it's this old, it's a trap that still functions from a dead war, from two dead societies, but it's just still out there, Meanwhile, Geordi's got to crack the puzzle here, and he's trying to figure out how they can do this. And he's going back into all the elements of the Enterprise, all the way back to when it was constructed. And he recreates the construction facility or whatnot on the holodeck, trying to go all the way back. And he conjures up the records of one of the head technicians on its design. And ultimately, I need to interact with this person. So he asks the computer to create a reasonable facsimile of this person, and of course it's a beautiful woman. And this is one of the earliest, I think, I'm trying to, Minuet was one too, but the holodeck episodes are a recurring theme here throughout Next Generation. And it also kind of gives a foreshadowing of obsessions with AI. You now have people who've fallen in love with AI girlfriends, all this type of stuff, and this is akin to that. Where, yes, it starts off early on before all the trouble happens. Geordi's on a date. He's trying to get with this girl, but it's just not happening, and she's not really into him, and it's just like, poor Geordi. He just can't seal the deal. And then he meets this woman who's a computerized facsimile of a real woman, so there will be consequences for this later in the series. But this is a reasonable facsimile thereof, and he's quite taken with her and really falls in love with her. And all that is the part of the consequences of this. Eventually comes up with the necessary plan they need. And ultimately, it's kind of obvious. Every time you exert power, the trap drains it. And so, you have to not use the power. But then how do you get out? And then it becomes obvious you just need a boost from the impulse engines, and you immediately cut it off because the ship will still go forward. So that's what they do, but they're still in the trap. And so they're able to briefly use as little power as they can. But as they're going, it becomes obvious they're going to run out of push here and still be trapped, or perhaps even collide with one of the asteroids or what have you. But Picard takes over the pilot seat because he's more experienced, and he realizes he can use, they directly lead the Enterprise to one of the large rocks out there, and he's able to use its gravity to slingshot the ship out of harm, and that's how they escape. So yet another one well thought out, crafted, even though, again, the solution was obvious. You got to figure out how to use as little power as possible, because every time you use power, it only increases the trap's hold on you, that kind of thing. But nevertheless, they do get there, and it also sets up an interesting problem that Geordi's going to have to deal with later on. And then other characters, eventually you get, of course, Barclay and the like. This sort of thing, it's a problem. You can imagine it's a serious condition that some people become addicts of holodeck, because, it's almost like the poor kid who was being offered to escape into illusion to spare him the pain he was in. And certainly the holodeck would suffice in that as well. And you just have to overcome that lure. So anyway, this is one of the earliest elements of that in this episode. That had a lot cool things in it, because I just like the concept of coming upon some old ancient vessel, that sort of thing. Plus, it leaves groundwork for other things to think about. Not that I want anyone to pick it up at this point with prequels or whatnot, but who were the Menthors and Promelians and all that? You know what happened? They wiped each other out, so I guess it doesn't really matter. But it was a cool thing. There's a certain element to it. I don't know what else you could do. I guess it plays out exactly the way it should, but there's just something cool about it, exploring the old derelict ship and all that sort of stuff. So 2 great episodes, yet 2 more examples the vast improvement that season 3 provided for Star Trek: The Next Generation.